we are back with another Agree or Disagree to kick off your race week, one day later than this episode normally goes out, as we build up to Silverstone number 2, headed towards the 70th anniversary Grand Prix. It's going to be a very exciting race, another one, hopefully. Well, it wasn't exciting the last one until the very end. The last 2 laps was pretty juicy to celebrate 70 years of Formula 1. It's going to be a very special event. But before we get there, let's start here with Agree or Disagree. So one of our favourite series that we do. We absolutely love hearing your guys' opinions. And yeah, it just divided the comment section sometimes on some various episodes, but nevertheless, we absolutely love hearing what you guys have to say. And hopefully you guys like what we have to say on those opinions. So let's kick off the episode and let's jump into opinion number 1. Oh, by the way, we've got 4 opinions for this episode. So Lyle, kick things off with the first opinion of Agree or Disagree this week.
So the first one comes in from Josh Potts, and he says F1 needs to find a better tyre supplier than Pirelli. This comes after of course, Pirelli had been in before, but this mainly comes after the British Grand Prix of 2020 on Sunday, when we were seeing a few tyre failures on curbs, mainly Danny Fiat's, even though it was rumoured that he got a puncture, but again, where from? When he hit the curb, obviously he span out and crashed at the Maggots and Beckett section, but nevertheless, there's been Pirelli failures before and problems with their tyres, and of course, Formula 1's used things like Dunlop and Bridgestone in the past. So to that, I'm going to say needs to find a better supplier. I'm going to say another possibly yes, but better no. So I'm going to say, do you know what I'm going to say? Agree.
I'm going to say, I'll say agree too.
Just to kind of spice it up. Obviously, there's been a lot of tyre debacles in the olden days. Remember, probably one of the most famous kind of tyre conversations, tyre conspiracies, things like that in Formula 1 was, of course, the 2005 US Grand Prix. Bridgestone, people lined up, of course, kind of protesting the tyres around in that race. I think a few failures went off in that weekend. So the British Grand Prix had just gone on. It was very similar to 2013 in that way. We were seeing problems with the tyres. Of course, that year had problems with the curb as well, but it was seen to be, if there was a problem with the tyres and things like delamination, it would have become more dangerous for the drivers. So we saw, of course, as I just said there at the start, Danny Fiat, he had his crash. And of course, the 2 incidents at the end, or should I say 3 incidents at the end, which of course involved the 2 Mercedes drivers of Valtteri Bottas and Lewis Hamilton and Carlos Sainz, who all had to be honest, that came from absolutely nowhere. Valtteri's was just the one to kind of kick it all off, and it just seemed to just go. Also, Lewis Hamilton as well, and of course, just on a side note, the way he got that car back to the finish line was absolutely spectacular. I imagine it would have looked 50 times cooler if you were in the grandstand from the National Pit Straight to the end. If you were in the grandstand, seeing the sparks come off that black Mercedes and see how he did that would have been insanely incredible. But it did look credible on the TV. Of course, I'd say other failures as well. I think Sebastian Vettel had one in Belgium a few years ago, and things like that. Pirelli have been good to rely on. They've been a good thing for Formula 1 to see. They've been good in the sport. Of course, we had in 2018 all of the rainbow tyres. There's about 9 varieties back then. Things like a super soft, hyper soft, and I can't believe it's not soft. So they have been good, reliable, and of course a massive name as Pirelli. They have had a lot of kind of big figures in Formula 1. A lot of money has come through as well, and they are a cool thing to have, of course, on a lot of the sports cars that you see on the road. I think that it would be good to revisit things like Bridgestone and Dunlop and other tyre companies that we've had in Formula 1 before. Again, if there is going to be a problem that we saw in Silverstone, and if that is something that the FIA want to bring up again with Pirelli, again, as I say, after they did in Silverstone 2013, Germany, again, was a sit down for the FIA just before the race to think what's going to happen about the tyres. Are they dangerous? What's happening? And the word change. I think it was a Kevlar belts were changed around the Pirelli tyres to make them more safe. If that is the case, of course, maybe we do look at getting another supplier in. I don't know who that would be. I mean, of course, there will be other tyre manufacturers other than Bridgestone and things like that. Of course, we're only saying them just because they used to be in Formula 1. But maybe, yes, the option is to go and further afield and look at other manufacturers. Pirelli are definitely good to have in. So again, if there is a problem with safety, maybe they would just look at improving theirs and not another brand. It would still be Pirelli's. But if we looked at maybe a safer version of Pirelli, yeah. So I'm saying agree because it would be kind of nice to have other manufacturers in there. Obviously, I'm not just saying there's probably more than like Bridgestone and stuff out there, but of course Bridgestone have already been in Formula One. It might be nice to see that, but obviously Pirelli are still good to have. So Jordan, of course, you say agree as well. Bit of a controversial one. Obviously, we're not saying Pirelli are bad, but kind of taking into consideration what happened in Silverstone and things, maybe it's better that we look at a new, basically someone else that isn't Pirelli, and kind of a new option for tyres, more durable ones and things like that. So yes, you said agree. Why was that?
Well, I'll admit I'm not too clued up on tyres. I don't really focus on them as much, but I know that a lot of fans aren't really happy with the Pirelli tyres and stuff, and especially a lot of people aren't happy with every car going with the whole one-stop strategy. Now, Pirelli, when they first came into the sport, they were going to introduce these 2 or 3 stop strategies, but it got to a point where, like in 2013, where the tyres were just blowing up all of a sudden, and especially in Silverstone 2013, it was a big thing, like what you said as well, Lyle. So, and then since then, I'm not really fully aware about, like I said, about the tyres, but I would like to see another tyre supplier in Formula 1 at the same time with Pirelli, just to have like one of them rival tyre wars again, like we used to have with the Bridgestones and the Michelins, I think it was. And of course, Michelin, they left on big circumstances, and again, Lyle, you talked about that with the 2005 US Grand Prix. So, well, that kicked things off anyway. So I would like to see like someone else maybe not take over, but Pirelli they're all right, but I mean that comment came in before the tyres were blowing up at Silverstone. So again, like I said before, fans aren't too happy with this, and they want a different kind of a manufacturer in to increase the strategy options. And I think it was good for Pirelli to introduce a load of a load more of softer and harder compounds of tyres. But like we said in a previous agree or disagree, it can get very confusing with all these different names, different colours. Especially if you're like a casual fan, it's just going to put people off. Because if you're confused by something in a certain sport, you're not going to follow it. So that would just drive people away. Now, they have sort of simplified it with the whole C1, C2, C3. It's like, again, a bit confusing, but not as bad as what it used to be, I suppose. So yeah, I would like to see maybe someone else get involved in Formula 1 and have that different kind of strategy with either maybe go for Pirellis or, I don't know, Michelin's again, or even Bridgestones or someone else, for example. I don't know. But again, it's a whole cost of making the tyres. Even though that for next season, Formula 1 are going with the 18-inch rimmed tyres for 2021. So that's going to be interesting to see how they pan out. A lot of people aren't really confident with that, but again, I'm not too clued up on tyres, like I said. So I'm like, we'll see how it goes. But I'm saying agree because like I'm kind of following some other F1 fans. Like they're saying they're not happy with the Pirelli tyres. But I kind of slight agree as well that I want to see some more other tyre manufacturers in the sport with Pirelli to have a little tyre war once again. That would be pretty interesting to see as well. And like I said, a different strategy for race weekend. So let's go on to the next opinion, which comes in from Lotus Raptos. And he says, customer cars should be allowed to exist if F1 wants to get new teams, especially given the financial hardships brought on by COVID-19. It may even be essential for the survival of some F1 teams, if not F1 itself. So basically, teams who aren't exactly financially, they haven't got much money behind them. So obviously, it takes a lot of money to build a Formula 1 car. I'm trying to think of the number off the top of my head. I did watch a couple of videos about this and I can't remember. I think it's about $50 million, I think it is, to build a Formula 1 car, or at least to be competitive. It could be a lot more than that, but I think that's a rough number teams spent on cars. The whole design of it, the wind tunnels and everything like that. I mean, of course, you've got customer engines, which certainly helps teams, because otherwise that's another X amount of $1 million as well on top of the budget. So customer cars should be allowed to exist. I'm gonna say agree.
I'm also gonna say agree.
Now, again, I do. In one aspect, it's almost like I disagree, because I do want to see each and every team come up with their own designs, which would be interesting to see. But if every team had the same budget, which not everybody doesn't, I mean, of course, that's going to come into play in next season. So, sorry, not in next season, but in 2022. Same, similar kind of chassis, limit on budget as well. So that's going to be interesting to see how it goes. But that's not gonna. It's for some teams, it's not going to be enough. So obviously they're still going to be, spending a lot less than what the budget requires. Unlike teams like Mercedes, who will be probably spending at that budget, and then chances are they're going to be still be competitive. So there are teams that are struggling who need, I would say, a bit of a drop in cash, which therefore getting a chassis, or let's say Mercedes or Ferrari, or even, I don't know, McLaren or Renault, for example, the teams who build their own chassis. Well, everyone does essentially, but unless you're Racing Point. But we'll get on to that in a little bit of controversy there as well. But again as well, just taking Racing Point into account, obviously they haven't took, in my opinion, any designs from Merck to put it into their own car. All they've done is took photos and just did it to perfection, in my opinion. Which everyone could do that, but obviously you've got the problem of, I think something else that Racing Point had the problem with last year was they were trying to go with higher rate cars, which is what Red Bull go with. But obviously they've got Mercedes power unit, they've got a Mercedes gearbox, a lot of Mercedes parts, which were low rake, so it didn't really work. So therefore they just went, let's go with Mercedes direction, have low rake car with low rake parts, all from Mercedes, and it works. So that's why a lot of teams don't want to copy the winners' cars, because it won't work. It won't, in conjunction with like Renault's parts or Honda's parts or Ferrari's parts, for example. It won't work. So, and who's to say that the chassis won't work for them? So that's what you got to take into account. But it would reduce a lot of costs for the smaller teams like Williams, Haas, Alfa Romeo to a certain degree. I mean, they would probably get a lot of Ferrari parts, as they do. So that would help the survival of Formula One teams, and as well may attract some newer teams. But I'm interested to see how it all pans out for the 2022 season when the new designs come into play, the budget cap. Will that help the sport? That's going to be interesting. I think if the sport continued on this path of where it's going at the moment with the current chassis and how dominant one team is being in particular, I think this could be a very good thing. But also I want to see how it pans out in 2022, and I think a lot of maybe car manufacturers or maybe businessmen will be looking at Formula One and going, if it works, I might just go into there and have a go at it, because I do want to see maybe one or two more teams in Formula One, and if it's financially independent and it works, then we could see maybe a couple of teams on the grid. And yes, of course, everyone's affected by COVID-19, not just Formula One, but everyone in the world. But as a sport, it's took a big dent in this as well. And, some teams are, I would say, lucky to be here, like so Williams and McLaren, for instance. They've took a big hit in this. So, yeah, I would say if the situation ever arises again, maybe, having customer cars, that could reduce a lot of the costs and maybe just save the team and essentially save a couple of jobs as well within the team. So, Lyle, you also said agree with this. What's your reasons?
Well, firstly, Formula One is good in terms of helping each other. It's not and it's not. It's not and it is. Of course, if you ever want to be competitive with each other, and things like Spygate has existed because teams are obviously not going to share things with other teams.
Not allowed to.
But
yeah.
There is some times when we see things where teams are helping other teams, and of course one of the biggest examples you can give from that, and actually linked with, of course, what's happened this year, was the Mercedes, like the biometrics hypertrain, the work that they were doing with hospitals and things like that. Of course, Formula One pulling together to help in the situation, of course, of coronavirus. Things like that, and of course, we have also seen problems. So again, I know it's only a small thing, but of course, Nico Hülkenberg driving for Racing Point this weekend, of course, only 2 days, not the Sunday, very sad. But again, like things like his race engine, his physiotherapist from Renault went to help Racing Point, and just little things like that. So teams are helping other teams in those kind of little if they get into problems in those kind of ways. I do think it is better because, of course, we know the money issue is a big thing in F1. Williams, of course, have about half the money that Mercedes do have. When I read this, or when I saw this tweet, the first thing that came to mind was the Formula 2 aspect. Formula 2, of course, use exactly the same cars, exactly the same tyres. There's obviously different things that are different, but the main thing is the driver, and that is it. And that's what makes Formula 2 a lot more exciting, because you really get to, it separates the men from the boys, and you really get to see who is on top, who is the best driver. And things like that would occur if there was more sharing and things like in Formula 1. I think it would be better. It really, really would do. And again, just going back to the Racing Point thing that Jordan brought up there, even though a lot of people, of course, are already kind of poking fun at Racing Point, saying that they're exactly the same copy of Mercedes and things like that, I think it's good for two reasons. One, because the two drivers, Sergio and Lance, or even Nico and Lance, obviously heading into this race, they have more of a competitive car to fight with the front runners. But mainly now they have a car that's almost as equal as Mercedes, and that kind of like that inflates this whole discussion and this tweet off. If Racing Point, who are a Mercedes company, who are a Mercedes customer team, are getting one Mercedes engine and then now Mercedes parts, so they're not just getting the internal combustion engine, they're getting the chassis. I mean, not directly, like Mercedes haven't gifted them the stuff, but if anything, they of course have copied the chassis and things like that. And if this was done legally, then it basically would be a Mercedes 2.0, just of course not as maybe as advanced. There would be some differences. And of course the big difference would be Lewis and Valerie are with the Mercedes team, and Sergio and Lance, or Nico and Lance, two lesser drivers, not as good as those two, are of course with Racing Point. It would make a more equal drive, because you would be thinking there is less of a difference between that Mercedes and that Racing Point. And then in turn, see if that happened with Ferrari and Haas. And then even in that train, as I said, with Williams, it happens with Mercedes. It happens with Mercedes at the top, Racing Point, who are of course very similar to Mercedes, but not Mercedes. And then just below Racing Point is Williams, a step down from Racing Point maybe, and of course 2 steps down from Williams, from Mercedes even. I'm getting my names mixed up here, but they would still be a very similar car. Now, we're already halfway there because they of course both have Mercedes engines, the ones that I've just mentioned. But if Williams were using a Mercedes chassis and other components from Mercedes that aren't just an internal combustion engine and not just what's gifted to them as a customer engine supplier, we could be seeing more evenly matched drives. And we could be seeing better drives for people like George Russell, who is a Mercedes junior driver and of course is tipped to drive for Mercedes and tipped to be a multiple world champion in the future. He is driving a Mercedes car at the moment in certain aspects. They use a Mercedes engine, they're sponsored by Mercedes, but if he was driving a car that was like the B version or the C version of Mercedes, it would make for better racing for everybody. And of course Williams in turn would do much better. It would be cheaper for them. But even if it wasn't cheaper, it would be better. They would have more of a Mercedes-like car, a better competitive car, and in turn that would bring in them more money, more sponsorship, and it would just be better for all of Formula One. It would create more competitive driving. And just going back to what I said about Formula 2 there, that is the thing with Formula 2. There's no real difference. The difference is between the drivers. So when people like Luca Giotto, Nick Latifi, and Nick de Vries were dominating last year in Formula 2, that was mainly 95% of it, which never happens in Formula 1. It's never 95% the driver, but it is 95% in Formula 2. So when Nick de Vries was dominating, that damn's car was good. Yes, it was damn fast. It was damn fast.
Jesus Christ.
But it was all Nick de Vries. And it was all Luca Giotto. And it was all Latifi at one point. And I don't know where that's gone. But again, like with Latifi, it was 95% Latifi. And that's how good he was. Now it's, say, 40% Latifi. And just look where he is now. And if they had a C Mercedes, and more components from Mercedes, a customer car, not just a customer engine, maybe Williams would be on top more. So, yes, that's why I think yes to that. Of course, there's a lot more variations in terms of that. Of course, let us know in the comment section, because that is a very big one. So moving on to the last one from me, Penultimate, in this episode. A bit of a shorter episode today, only 4 opinions. But this one is a stonker, and normally we keep our title till the end. But this is a title right here. We're a bit kind of, should we include this guy, should we not? Because he's been in every single episode. But he comes out with some crackers. So if you're like that, then, you might even be in next week. And of course, that is Uzer. So well done, Uzer. You've been in every episode we've done. Well done, you, man. So
he makes some good opinions. I must admit, he brings up some really good ones, and I'm like,
well, of course, that's why, we wouldn't have him in if we didn't. But he does have some really, really good ones. And he comes out with one very similar to, very kind of on the mind from Silverstone, of course, domination of Mercedes. And that is exactly it. People need to stop blaming Mercedes for dominating F1 and making it boring. People should instead blame Ferrari and Red Bull for having big budgets, yet getting nowhere near Mercedes. The FIA should also be blamed for not changing their regulations soon enough. Mercedes is blameless. Mercedes is blameless. Wow. I mean, if you've stayed in the video long enough to see us say this and see our opinions, you deserve a pat on the back. You really, really do. Because I imagine 3/4 of these people who are going to see this video will react to the thumbnail alone and think, no way, Mercedes are just amazing. People need to stop blaming Mercedes and people need to stop blaming Ferrari. Again, that's another controversial one. But to that, I'm going to say, I don't know, can we do a neutral? To that, I'm going to say, do you know what I'm going to say, agree.
People need to stop blaming Mercedes. That's a tough one because you can be on the fence. We can go yeah, but no, and that's... I'm stuck with this one. I'm really stuck. I could say either one, and I don't know which one. I'll go opposite with Lyle for this one. I'll just say disagree.
Well, it was a hard one, obviously, because I agree. On the fence, it's very much an on the fence one. It's an agree probably by 51-49. It's how Donald Trump got it. It's 54-49. So yes, obviously Mercedes dominating Formula One. It's not to be blamed. It's people had to go to Sebastian Vettel when he was dominating with Red Bull, and when Red Bull were dominating, people look. Well, I'm using Red Bull as an example here because obviously this was the team that we both kind of got into Formula One. They were the team on top. Everyone looked at Red Bull thinking, what are they doing? Why is Adrian Newey, the miracle guy, designing these amazing cars? And what is going on with them? We thought they were superstars, and if anything, we were blaming Red Bull. We were thinking, oh, you're doing something wrong here, and we kind of detest you as a team. And I think that's why a lot of people don't like Red Bull or didn't, and chose other teams. And then we got round to the V6 era. Of course, 2013 was better for Mercedes, but of course an absolute domination by Red Bull still. Yeah. We got to 2014. Regulations changed, and Red Bull couldn't match what they did with the V8s. They had the same drivers. Well, they had one driver, of course, the reigning champion Sebastian Vettel, who didn't just do okay. He went bang on the floor because he was pretty bad in that year. Of course, got the better of his team, and Daniel Ricciardo, who won 3 over the reigning champion. So you thought, what is going on at Red Bull? What is the problem? And it was just another team had picked up the ball. The ball that Red Bull had just dropped. Of course, Mercedes, since the get-go, have had the upper hand on the V6s. Everything that they do is just perfect. And even this DAS system is just perfect. Anything you want, anything the FIA can change in this V6 hybrid era, Mercedes are definitely going to have it in the bag. When they change regulations next, of course they changed it in 2022. They're not changing from V6s, they're keeping hybrids and things like that, but obviously they are changing some of the different things on the car. Different restrictions are being lifted, and of course some are being imposed, and of course a different design of the car. So maybe that's another thing to stump Mercedes. But in terms of the engine, in terms of the regulations in that way, they of course have been on it. It's very similar also to Braun in 2009. They just were able to capitalise on this, and it's just one team's domination. It really, really is, when they've just been able to design the best thing for it. People need to stop blaming Mercedes in the way of they have the best car. Of course, have amazing drivers in Lewis and Valtteri for sure, but they are the team on top. And if we're just going to blame the team that are winning all the time, you've got to think, well, what team are you not going to hate? Because whatever team you don't hate, so for example, if you're a Williams fan or you support Williams because they're not winning, what happens when Williams win? Do you hate them? Like McLaren, they're not winning at the moment. Everyone loves McLaren. Of course, I'm not a McLaren fan, but they're my second team. I'm a big fan of McLaren, and of course Jordan is as well, a number 1 team. So when they start winning races, are we going to hate McLaren for that? Because not just maybe one off, but if they win, 5 in a row, are we going to hate McLaren for that? Because they've won 5 in a row. They've finally had a year. Next year, if they dominate next year, are we going to hate them? It doesn't work like that. You've got to really take your hat off to a team, and you've got to appreciate when a team is dominating. The Red Bull and Ferrari bit, they do have big budgets, but again, just there's something at Mercedes. Of course, Red Bull and Ferrari are still good teams making big developments. Some years you win, some years you lose. Of course, I think Red Bull ironed out their problems early on in the V6 era. 2014, 2015, bad years for Red Bull, of course, even though they got 3 wins with Danny Rick. Winless in 2015. 2016 was okay, but again, I think Red Bull's still ironing out problems in that year. Of course, Max Mania kind of just, put a tarp over that. And now Ferrari are succumbing to problems with the regulations that they're not being able to keep up with. And the third thing, the FIA should change the regulations more. I think if we saw the 2022 regulations opposed in 2018, 2019, it might have been better, because that's like 4 or 5 years of Mercedes domination. The FIA come in again, change it, of course, like they're going to do in 2 years' time. That might have changed it, but of course we've had quite a long domination year of Mercedes. Because if the regulations change in 2022 and Mercedes then just all of a sudden stop, the FIA will be the blame will be put on them. Why didn't you do this earlier? Why didn't you do this earlier? Because as I just said, if they changed it in 2018, we could be seeing a whole different ball game. Mercedes might have dominated up until 2018. Lewis would have been a 4 or 5 world champion, and then it could have gone back to Red Bull, or it could have gone to Ferrari after 20 years of playing catch up in the regulation times. It's definitely a hard one to see, but every regulation change where we see one team will just capitalise and one team will really just dominate from it, and it's not anything to hate because they're winning. You've just got to admire how well they're doing, and if anything, you look to the other teams and you think they should be keeping catch up. We don't hate any of the teams, but Mercedes and but anything in that statement, the only ones you can look at and think they need the blame can be put more on them is Mercedes, is Ferrari and Red Bull, because Mercedes are at the top. Who cares what they do? Who cares if they get the blame? Red Bull and Ferrari are the teams playing catch up, and that's what they need to do. And they shouldn't rely on regulation changes to change that around. If they're just sitting back like Ferrari, if they're just sitting back and waiting for the 2022 regs, that's a bad mentality from the team. They really should be changing. They should be chasing it. But I think people shouldn't blame Mercedes. They shouldn't blame the FIA. But maybe when the regulations change, we can see another change in domination. Jordan, of course, you say disagreeing with me for the first time in the episode. Definitely love that. People should hate Mercedes then, maybe. And the regulation changes should happen more often. So why did you say disagree?
Well, like I said before, I'm very on the fence with this. Like, this is probably, it is tough, but I'll say disagree because it is Mercedes dominating the sport. So ultimately, take away what they are doing behind the scenes, is always Mercedes winning. Now that's gonna I mean, I'll like reference this comment. Like, we got a comment from a guy who commented on our video that we did. Why is F1 boring? Because at the time it was just after the Spanish Grand Prix. That was a boring race. We only had one boring race at the start of 2019. If you remember then, like how boring the season was at the start. I mean, Bahrain was pretty good, but other than that, it was like, what the hell is this? This is a boring season so far. Then Austria turned around and the season just turned on its head. And he was just saying, I don't like Formula One because it's one team winning all the time, which is true because Mercedes have won the constructors every single year since 2014. Hamilton's won every single championship since 2014, apart from 2016, which was obviously Nico Rosberg, who was in the Mercedes. So again, they've got a 100% record in that aspect, and there has been a regulation change in 2017. So Mercedes are still on top. So it's their work. They have worked hard to do the research to prepare for the engine regs in 2014, and Mercedes dominated then, and we thought, all the teams are going to play catch up, and they're still playing catch up. If anything, they've took a big step back. And is that their fault? Is that Mercedes' fault? I would say that's more the team's fault because they're not on the Mercedes level. But like I said, it is Mercedes. They're dominating the sport, and it is putting fans off from watching Formula One in that aspect, because when you're a casual fan, you just want to see who wins, who's on the podium perhaps. You're not going to bother, you're not going to care about who's in the midfield with drivers that you might not know. You might have heard of Lando Norris, but you might not know who Carlos Sainz is, who Ocon is, maybe who isn't Ricciardo if you're not a big fan. So you're like, I don't care about these. I know who Hamilton is, I know who Vettel is, I know who Verstappen is, the big names. So, and if they're not at the front, it's just Mercedes running away with it. You go, I'm not going to watch it. It's boring. Because even though I would like to see a more competitive grid at the front, I don't find it boring because, one, we had 7 months with no Formula One, so I would take a Mercedes domination year any day of the week. And I'm more interested in what's going on in the midfield. And like we're seeing at the British Grand Prix, just don't expect Mercedes are going to run away with it, because anything could happen, and it did, and that spices things up. But if you're a casual fan and you're not going to, or just trying to get into Formula One, you're not going to watch that far into the race, because you're like, oh, Mercedes have won it, blah 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 blah. But also, I slightly do agree with it, because Mercedes are, like I said, they've put in all the investment to and worked hard as a team to get them to where they are today. Ferrari and Red Bull and other teams need to do more to get closer to them. I mean, for example, why are Ferrari not on par with Mercedes with the budget that they have, the money that they get? They get more money than anybody else. They get the money for turning up, for Christ's sake. And where are they? Slower than the McLarens? Possibly. I mean, Charles Leclerc did do well, but I mean, come on. It's McLaren, for crying out loud. I mean, they're not brilliant as it yet, but this is Ferrari we're talking about here. You know what I mean? So, that's why I'm slightly on the fence with that, but I would say disagree, because it is Mercedes building the car at the end of the day. It is Mercedes who are doing well in the sport, which is not a bad thing to some degree, but yeah, there has to be a line of like, okay, Mercedes have been dominant the sport, and it's like, yeah, it is getting a bit boring for some people now, but like I said, I would take Mercedes domination here any day of the week. So the final opinion of agree or disagree comes in from Charlotte Taylor, a regular person who does comment on the channel. She says, the group of young drivers we have on the grid now, and she comments and she says, Charles, Max, George, Lando and Carlos are the best young drivers F1 has ever had. Now, I think this is like one of those opinions that you can get mistaken for, and if you give your opinion with this, then you might someone might take it the wrong way, which is why when I say my opinion, don't immediately think what I'm about to think, or don't think of what I'm actually thinking. You know what I mean? Because just don't jump into it. Because I'm going to say agree.
I'm also going to say agree.
Now, by saying agree, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that these bunch of guys are going to be the best drivers F1 has ever had in Formula 1, because Charles, Max, George, Lando or Carlos, they could never win a championship in their life. It's at least one of them will, but you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know. Red Bull might plummet, Ferrari might plummet, or even McLaren, they could plummet again, or Lando could go to another team and just fail. You know what I mean? That's a possibility. And as well, same with George. Mercedes might go into 2022 and might not be the team that they once were, because we have seen teams do that. It's unlikely, but we have seen teams fall off the pace. So, but taking that away, just forgetting about the future for a bit, we've never had so many young drivers coming through the ranks ever at all. We've had special talents in the ranks where one guy is going to do well. Probably the famous one in more recent times is, of course, Lewis Hamilton. Everybody knew how good he was in the lower ranks. But when you get to Formula 1, there is that question mark of, can he hack it? Because it's a big jump from GP2 or Formula 2 or even Formula 3000 back in the day to Formula 1. It's a big, big step. And there's a lot of pressure on you, especially if you're British, because there's a lot of attention on you, because you want to be, we've had us British, the British drivers, we've had a lot of success, a lot of failures, but also a lot of success. And some of the best drivers ever in Formula 1 have came from Britain. So immediately there's that pressure for you to be the next British star, and especially if you're labelled by the media as the next British star. And Hamilton, just as if he'd been in Formula 1 for 10 years at that point in 2007. It was like, wow, he beat Fernando Alonso. It was incredible. That was only one driver. I mean, there's been a couple of others where they've been tipped to do well. I mean, Stoffel Van Dorn was one of those drivers. He had a brilliant junior career, and then look where he's in Formula E, which is good, but I would assume he would want to be in Formula 1 more, going at McLaren at the wrong time, being alongside Fernando Alonso. That's what I'm saying about being at the wrong place at the wrong time. You know what I mean? But you look at those names now, like Charles, brilliant driver, Max Verstappen, future world champion, George Russell, quality driver in a really bad car, Lando Norris, he's a good driver, but what he did for his crash helmet designed to get a 6-year-old to design his crash helmet, have it on, put it on his obviously for the British Grand Prix. Very unique, very, very special. And you go, that's different. That's brilliant from Lando Norris. And again, that's not linked to his driving, but in terms of personality as well, comes with, big things in Formula One, as well as your driving. Of course, Lando did well in the junior categories, and he's doing pretty well, I would say, in Formula One this season. Only his second season in Formula One. And yeah, Carlos Sainz, he's going to Ferrari. Very good driver. Future world champion? Possibly. We'll have to wait and see about that one. She didn't say Alexander Albon, for instance. I wonder why. But nevertheless, yeah, I would say, in terms of young talent, as a group individual, yes, this is the best group of young drivers F1 has ever had. Is it going to be the best that F1 will ever have? That's another question. That's another debate. But we'll leave it there. So yes, I would say completely agree with Charlotte Taylor's sorry about that opinion. Lyle, you also said agree. We've got a brilliant bunch of young talent in Formula One at the moment, haven't we? It is absolutely brilliant to see.
Yeah, exactly. I think for me, obviously the on-track action will definitely speak for itself, but in the olden days of Formula One, it was very much, serious and stuff. You came into Formula One mid-20s, massive backing, got into a big car and just dominated, did all your talking on the track and then left. And there was no real, I don't know, it didn't feel like none of the drivers were friends with each other. It didn't feel like, or anything like that. And again, you just mentioned there, obviously, Shaw didn't mention Alexander Albon, but I want to mention him for now. Alex Shaw, Alex Lando, and George, of course, the three that really, they're like a little family. You know what I mean? That's where they all came from. They all came from Formula 2. They all came from different... They all basically... Well, obviously, they're all British. They all grew up together and drove together. Obviously, Lando drove with George when he was a kid and things like that. They all know each other from that. And, of course, a lot of drivers knew each other. Lewis rode with Seb when he was a kid, and they drove with Fernando. And, they all know each other through then. But in bits and bobs, drips and drabs. But these grew up together. And even Charles Leclerc and Pierre Gasly, again, Gasly not mentioned on there, he's not a youngster. I mean, he is compared to 20 years ago in Formula 1. He definitely is a youngster, but now he's not. And that's actually another scary thing. To be a youngster, you've got to be of the age of teenager, or an age of younger than us, and scary young, scary. But again, like those two, they went on holiday together when they were kids. They knew each other, they grew up together through all the laughs and the jokes, and they were just friends at the end of the day. And now we're seeing them at the pinnacle of sport. We're all seeing them joking on before they get into the cars. We're all seeing them, raise, kind of just boost the sport in every sense of the word, just with how friendly they are, how pally they are. It's like how you would go on with your friends playing football or whatever. And that's the best thing about it. They all drive together, they all drive different cars, of course, and they're all competing against each other. But that's just all black and white. That's not going to change. That's the same as when Lewis was driving against Michael, and just that's always going to be the same wheel-to-wheel action. Of course, it doesn't matter how old you are. It's mainly about what they do out of the car, just how well they get on with each other. Also, the way that they promote the sport. And again, like Jordan said there, the social media presence. Lando always does his Twitches and drives online and stuff. It's easier. I mean, it's not easy, but it's easier, I would say, to talk to drivers through Instagram lives and stuff like that. Of course, people, you can get more famous people from the grid on chats and stuff, and it's easier to contact them. They pop up on Twitter. I mean, Lando commented under our YouTube video and things like that. They're more active on social media, again, promoting the sport, but promoting themselves. 10 years ago, they would be doing that. And even the older guys wouldn't be doing that. Kimi and Seb, they're not on social media. Lewis is, but again, he's not one of those type of people to go on like a Lando kind of would, be up at 2 a.m, spamming or playing F1 2020 on Twitch. He wouldn't be doing that. It's just the type of presences that they can have out of the car. And really, it's about kind of their own personalities outside the car, which is different. It's always going to be different. And really, all of those gel together. And again, those names, as she said there, Max and Charles and Lando, and they're all different teams, different nationalities. Max is Dutch and Charles from Monaco. They're going to be rivals in one part. They're going to be Michael Schumacher versus Mika Hakkinen, they're going to be like the next big things to watch. But again, they're getting on really well, joking on. As I said there, with Charles and Pierre, they could have gone different directions. They're in different cars, different programs. But again, joking on like the friends. And obviously Max and Lando and Alex and George, we saw that F1 rookie thing they did on YouTube last year. So, I mean, I know that might, you couldn't say that's just all for PR. They might hate each other behind the scenes. But I don't think they do. And again, it's just those kind of things I think happen out of the car. This question, in the car, I'm like, they're okay. Well, no, actually, no, they're not okay. They're good. And obviously, I agree with what she's saying. I agree with what you've been saying as well, Jordan. Future world champions, definitely. And their progression is going to be massive. They're going to be here for another 20 years. At least a few of them are going to be here for another 20 years. Because they have that, Max Verstappen, he just surpassed 1,000 Grand Prix points. And he's only 22. 106 starts. He's now the most successful Dutch driver in Formula 1 in terms of starts, but actually most successful as well. But, he started the most Grand Prix for a Dutch driver, one of two, and one of Verstappen's. But anyway, so like they're going to be here for a long time, and of course inside the car, incredible things. But for me, that this statement is so true for out of the car, for their personalities and what they do for the sport, for each other, and yeah, as I said, just how pally they are, how good they are together. So that's definitely an agree for that one. So obviously that's the end of the agree or disagree. Again, a bit of a short one today, only 4 opinions. But Jordan, again, like always, it's been an incredible one, hasn't it? And of course, it's just heading into another great round at Silverstone when 3 laps, really. So those last 3 laps were better than the 52 we had. 48 of those laps, you're all right. Lap 50 to 52, yes. And of course, hopefully the 70-year is as good, even though it's no fans. But just quickly, Jordan, just the last thing, before we end. What was it like for you to watch with no fans? Because obviously we were supposed to be going, we were supposed to be in Vale. Obviously, a lot of people that will be watching us as well will, of course, be going. We know a few of the YouTubers that would have been going as well. No fans. No actual as well. Just one thing as well, which I thought they were going to be doing. I thought they were going to be doing like interactive kind of videos, around the track. I thought they were going to do something like that. But what was it like with no fans? And also as well, Martin Brundle said that drivers say that extra 100th of a second, or that little kind of that edge comes from the fans at Silverstone. But of course, there was no fans there. So do you think that would have affected the drivers? But yes, no fans. What was it like for you watching the race that we should have been at? And of course, home of Formula 1, but with no fans.
It was. I mean, I remember saying this to you as well, Lyle, about, I said in practice and qualifying, I could notice that there was no fans because, that used to seem, obviously, ourselves, we've been to Silverstone before a couple of times. We've seen how packed it can be and how amazing the atmosphere is. But then, for say in practice and qualifying, I could almost tell that there was, but in Hungary and Austria, I couldn't tell. I was like, it's just like normal essentially. But obviously you do see the grandstands and you go, there's no fans there. You sometimes forget. But in practice and qualifying, it was like, I can notice. It just doesn't feel right. It feels weird. But in the race, that went back to normal. I was like, it feels like as if fans are there. But when the camera pans to the grandstands, it's not, there's nobody there, which is a bit weird. So, and of course the podium celebration, seeing no fans there, which is. It is strange, of course it is, especially at Silverstone. I mean, when they were doing the interviews, I mean, just pans to the grandstand, there's nobody there, about 15 minutes before lights out. It's unseen, it's unheard of at Silverstone. It's not the same without fans. And by the way, if you were watching the Sky feed and you've seen that, the little thing that they did as well, like, obviously telling fans that we'll miss Silverstone and stuff like that. The pollen count was very high on that particular day. There was something in my eye. I wasn't crying. It was just something in my eye. that was pretty good actually. That was pretty good. But yeah, it isn't the same without.
And obviously, Jordan, we didn't make the cut. I don't get why we didn't make the cut. Exactly. We'd have been great singing that song.
Sky, what's going on? What is going on with Sky? Honest to God, we should have made the cut. I mean, we're friends with Lando now, so
of course.
We should be friends with Sky. That's the next one, isn't it?
And Roman, he liked one of our tweets.
And Roman Grosjean, yes, you're right there. Yeah, so we'll pally with Grosjean and Lando. I wonder who's next. Verstappen, perhaps. Maybe not. Exactly. But anyways, yes. So obviously that's where we're going to wrap up agree or disagree. Thank you so much for watching, as always, for the build-up for the 70th anniversary Grom Prix. And actually, just a little something as well for you guys in the comment section below. Since this weekend is, you know, building up to the 70th anniversary of British Grand Prix, what's been your favourite Grand Prix that you've ever been to live? Since there is no fans, like what Lal alluded to before, the best race you've ever attended, just like a little one for you guys as well, just to leave it in the comment section below as always. But we've got a big week as always, leading up to the Grand Prix. F1 24/7 news tomorrow. Then we've got our race preview on Thursday. Have a day off on Friday, you know, because you can't have too much debate show in your life. It's unhealthy for you. Doctors have proved this. About 99% of people don't need F1 debate shows more than 3 days a week. So have a day off on Friday, then we're back for Saturday and Sunday. Saturday is the debate show, and Sunday is the live review on our YouTube channel, hosted by myself for this week. So anyways, guys, if you're new around here, then please like and subscribe as well, and comment below about anything that was said in today's episode, and leave your opinions as always in the comment section below. Watch what you're doing, guys. Stay safe as always, and until next time, we'll see you later.
See you later, guys.